Feedback mechanisms are the way in which the body regulates certain set points. And we can call those set points an internal steady state. And if you think about it, you probably know offhand some set points, kind of like body temperature usually is 98.0, which is the official average as of 10 years ago. You may know that blood pressure has a target of 120/80. There's also things in your body like how much potassium, how much sodium there should be. But all of these things, whether it's your body temperature, blood pressure, or osmolarity, they all are controlled by these set points and mechanisms that help you fluctuate around the set point. The key here is that the outside environment, the external environment, has these large fluctuations. And despite these large fluctuations, you have very small fluctuations within the body. In fact, many times the fluctuations are so tiny that you can't even observe that they're taking place. So anything that fluctuates around a set point, any process that returns you to a set point, is said that it is managed via something called negative feedback. Negative feedback is when we reverse the stimulus. So for example, the sun might be shining on you in a hot blacktop parking lot like the one outside of FLCC, and despite the fact that that sun makes you hot, you have certain mechanisms within your body that will reverse that stimulus and bring you back to 98.0. So this awkward diagram here gives you the idea of fluctuating around a set point. We can say that this line right here might be equal to 98.0 degrees Fahrenheit. And as you can see, the body temperature goes low, and then mechanisms in your body bring it back up to its set point. Your body temperature goes high, and mechanisms in your body bring it back to that set point. When I say that mechanisms within your body do this, what I mean is that there is a collection of organs that work together to control your body temperature. And this is what we call a negative feedback loop, that it usually incorporates 2 or more organs. There is always an organ that is an receptor, and therefore it could be a thermoreceptor sensing temperature, baroreceptor sensing pressure. We have tactile receptors that sense touch on your skin. But no matter what, the first thing in a negative feedback loop is that the receptor senses a change from the set point. It doesn't decide what to do or anything like that. It just senses a change. When it senses that change, usually the information it receives goes to a control center. Now, for us in the beginning of this class, the control center is usually going to be the brain, but we will find out that there are other control centers that are more important than the brain later on. But the control center makes a decision. It says, whoa, body temperature is going up, the outside is hot. Let's turn on the sweat glands to turn the temperature back down. So the control center is not able to make this change, but it's able to send a signal to your sweat glands that they should open up and start doing more. And so the control center sends a signal to what is called an effector. This has to be an organ or a tissue within your body. It can't be a process. For example, sweating is not the effector. Sweat glands are the effector, and their effect is sweating, right? So this has to be a noun, not a verb. Sweating doesn't do it. It has to be a noun. Shivering doesn't do it. You would have to be making reference to the muscles that do the shivering, right? So a negative feedback loop involves these three components. Now, I want to let you know that sometimes the receptor and the control center can be the same thing. When your body becomes salty, when you have more solute than solvent, more solid than liquid in your blood, the receptor and the control center are the same organ, which is the hypothalamus. Your pancreas is both receptor and control center. There are even little organs on your thyroid called the parathyroid organs, and they are both receptor and control center. So we'll see that receptor and control center can be combined into one organ. I like this diagram because I made it. I'm kidding. I like this diagram because the way in which it is displayed speaks to me about homeostasis. If this doesn't speak to you, that's okay, but you'll find different representations of homeostasis and negative feedback, and I encourage you to find one that speaks to you so that you can make a diagram that makes sense to you instead of trying to go off of diagrams in the book or ones that I have made. But what we see is here's the set point, which is 37 degrees Celsius, which is equivalent to 98.0 Fahrenheit. And what we're seeing here is that the temperature can increase, and then we have an effector, a control center, a receptor, a control center, and an effector that will bring us back to our set point. Down here, we have that the set point decreases, and we have a receptor, a control center, and effectors that bring us back to the set point. So this is why I like this diagram, because it shows you what happens if you increase beyond the set point, and it shows you what happens if you decrease. And I like the loop because it returns you back to that set point. So what I have here is that these are some pictures of skin. And you can see that because I have a little call out here, a little box on the side of this arm. So what we're seeing here is that this darker color is what is called the epidermis. And this other color here is called the dermis, which basically underlies it. These structures right here are nervous structures. In fact, there's structures in your skin that are capable of receiving information about the outside environment. One of them being temperature and one of them being touch. But we'll find that there are tons of receptors in your skin that interact with the outside environment. These receptors sense a change in temperature in the outside environment. They then send an electrical signal, which is called an action potential, which is like sending an email. It's very quick. I get a response very quickly. So it sends an action potential to the control center, which is a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus does two things. Number one, it tells sweat glands, which are the effectors. It says, hey, start releasing some sweat. And that's what you see here. It also tells other structures in the body to start playing back as well. These are blood vessels. We're going to abbreviate that as BV. And these blood vessels are dilated, which means that they're bringing a lot of heat to the surface of the skin. And that heat is being removed from the skin and thus putting us back to the set point. Down here with shivering, we have a similar situation, that there is a receptor that sends a very quick signal called an action potential to the part of the brain that senses your temperature, and that would be the hypothalamus. But here, the hypothalamus sends out two signals that do the opposite. We're not releasing sweat, we're not dilating our blood vessels. What we're doing here with our blood vessels is constricting them. And if I do that for too long, I will get frostbite, which is a lack of blood flow to an area. I personally have frostbite on the septum of my nose because I once went out and shoveled the driveway when it was too cold out. So these blood vessels constricting, what they do is they concentrate the blood to the internal of the body. We also have some shivering here too. So again, there are two responses, two types of effectors, blood vessels and muscles. And these two effectors work together to bring the body temperature back to the set point. I encourage you to print out this slide without all of my horrible drawings on it. And you should fill this out for yourself. In fact, maybe making a sentence or two would be helpful, because what you have on this slide is a lot of visual representation of this concept. I would love to see you put it into your own sentences of a verbal or written representation of this concept. Therefore, when you go to take the quiz and it asks you something about body temperature homeostasis, you already have some really nice sentences written. Okay, so negative feedback is what we see most commonly in the body. And many students perceive that negative feedback is good because it helps us maintain our set points. I'm not going to argue with that. But there also is something called a positive feedback mechanism. And instead of reversing the stimulus to the set point, what positive feedback does is it enhances the stimulus and further takes you farther and farther away from the set point. So as here with negative feedback, the set point goes down and it's brought back up to homeostasis. Over here with positive feedback, we just get further and further and further away every minute. We get further and further away from our set point. Anaphylaxis, which is a life-threatening, acute, very quickly acting allergy in which every single blood vessel in your body opens up, flooding blood into your tissues. Anaphylaxis just gets worse and worse and worse until somebody comes over and stabs you in the butt with an EpiPen. Actually, not the butt, side of the thigh, right? So anaphylaxis is positive feedback. And many students think that anaphylaxis is bad, but it's not. It's actually your immune system trying very, very hard to save your life. It's just that the immune system goes to any degree to do that. Kind of a circular argument. Blood clotting is also a positive feedback mechanism. In fact, in blood clotting, let me draw a blood vessel for you. Here's a blood vessel. In blood clotting, what we do is we get a little tear in the blood vessel, and some platelets start to congregate by the tear. And what happens is as more platelets congregate, they attract more platelets. And then they tell two friends, and they tell two friends, and they tell two friends. And basically, it's a platelet party. Blood clotting is a good thing. It's a benefit to you, and it uses positive feedback as a benefit. Labor, as I hear but don't know from my own personal experience, labor is also a positive feedback mechanism. The labor contractions get more and more each time, right? And until you kind of poop out the baby. Well, you don't poop out the baby, but you know what I'm saying. So we usually perceive positive feedback mechanisms to be kind of a bad thing in the body, but it's not. In fact, many positive feedback mechanisms are taking place right now in your body, and they're maintaining homeostasis for you.